Most people know the names Zeus, Odin, or Ra. But the oldest gods came long before those. They weren't always powerful. They weren't always human-like. In the earliest stories ever told, the gods were strange, sometimes frightening, and often deeply connected to the natural world. In this video, we're going back, way back, to explore the very first divine stories from ancient civilizations. We begin in southern Mesopotamia, where the world's first known civilization emerged. The Sumerians, living over 5,000 years ago, built cities like Uruk and Eridu, developed writing, and laid the foundation for the earliest pantheon of gods ever recorded. Their creation story doesn't start with light, or fire, or a supreme being. It starts with water. To the Sumerians, the universe began as a vast, living sea called Namu. She wasn't just a goddess, she was the ocean itself, deep, infinite, and formless. From her came everything that would one day become the world. The first beings to emerge from Namu were in the sky and Ki, the earth. These weren't gods who ruled the sky and the land. They were the sky and the land. In the beginning, and in Ki were joined together. There was no space between them, no air, no sunlight, no life. Then came Enlil, their son. Enlil is one of the most important gods in Sumerian mythology. He represented the air, the wind, the invisible force between sky and earth. His first act was to separate his parents, to push an upward and press Ki downward. This act created the space in which life could exist. It was the moment creation truly began. After that, Enlil took control of the heavens. He became the king of the gods, powerful, strict, and often unpredictable. But while the sky was now in order, the earth remained dry and lifeless. This is where another major god enters the story, Enki. Enki, the god of fresh water and wisdom, lived in the underground waters known as the Abzu. From there, he brought fertility to the land. He carved rivers, filled canals, made crops grow, and ensured that nature worked as it should. If Enlil was about control and divine law, Enki was about balance, creativity, and problem-solving. The Sumerian gods weren't isolated in a heaven above the clouds. They were part of the environment: wind, water, storm, soil. And unlike later gods, they weren't always wise or just. They had human traits: anger, jealousy, fear. They made mistakes. According to one key myth, the gods eventually became tired. Managing the world, its crops, weather, rituals was exhausting. So they decided to create a new being to do the work for them. That's when Enki proposed creating humans. The reason wasn't noble. Humans weren't made out of compassion or love. They were created to relieve the gods of hard labor. Enki and the birth goddess Ninhursag shaped humans from clay. But clay wasn't enough. It had no life. So they sacrificed a lesser god and mixed his divine blood with the clay, giving humans a soul, a sense of purpose, and a connection to the divine. From the beginning, humans were designed to serve. Their role was to maintain temples, grow food, perform offerings, and keep the gods happy. There was no promise of reward after death. Life was duty, service. But even this new arrangement had problems. Humans multiplied. They became noisy, restless, chaotic. Enlil, irritated by the disruption, sent a great flood to wipe them out. But Enki, again acting as the protector of life, warned one man, Zeus, to build a boat and save his family. This story, carved into clay thousands of years ago, is likely the origin of later flood myths, including the tale of Noah in the Bible. Sumerian mythology wasn't about good versus evil. It wasn't about right and wrong. It was about explaining the world. Why rivers flood, why crops fail, why people suffer, why death exists. The gods were part of nature, unpredictable, powerful, sometimes cruel, sometimes generous. And in that early worldview, humanity didn't control anything. It obeyed. The ancient Egyptians left behind temples, pyramids, and some of the most detailed religious writings of the ancient world. Their mythology is vast and layered, but at the heart of it is one of the earliest full creation stories we know. And it all begins with a single god, completely alone. In the beginning, there was no sky, no earth, no people, not even other gods. There was only a dark, silent ocean called None, the primeval waters of chaos. It had no direction, no light, no shape. And then something emerged from it, a hill. That first land, rising from the water, was called the Benben, and on it stood a god named Atum. Atum was the first god. He wasn't born. He created himself. The Egyptians described him as complete, both male and female, containing all potential. He had no parents, no companions, and no tools. And yet, he was the source of everything. Standing alone on the Benben, Atum decided to create life. The myths say he produced his first children, Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture, by either spitting them out or through an act of masturbation. The details vary, but the point remains. Creation came directly from him. Shu and Tefnut drifted off into the waters. When they didn't return, Atum grew worried. So he sent out his eye, a part of himself, to search for them. When they were finally found and brought back, Atum wept with joy. From his tears, humans were born. That's one of the many Egyptian explanations for the origin of mankind. And it's interesting. Humans don't appear as tools for the gods, like in Sumer. Here, they're born from divine emotion, from relief and connection. From Shu and Tefnut came two more gods, Geb, the earth, and Nut, the sky. But like the Sumerian story, they were locked together at first. There was no space between earth and sky. So Atum ordered Shu, the air, to push them apart. Nut became the sky, arching above. Geb became the land beneath. And in between, the world could finally exist. Now that space was created, the rest of the gods could take their place. Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys, the famous divine family. All descend from Geb and Nut. But Atum remained at the center of it all, later merging with Ra, the sun god, to become Atum Ra. Ra was more than just the sun. He was the ruler of the cosmos. Each morning, he sailed his solar boat across the sky. At sunset, he descended into the underworld, and during the night, he traveled through a series of dangerous realms. The greatest threat was a massive serpent named Apophis, a force of pure chaos, trying to destroy the order Ra brought with his light. Every night, Ra fought Apophis in the darkness, and every morning he emerged victorious, bringing the sunrise with him. But this battle wasn't guaranteed. It had to be fought every single night for eternity. That's how the Egyptians saw the universe: fragile, cyclical, and always in need of protection. What's striking about Egyptian mythology is how organized it is. Everything had a place, a balance. The gods weren't random forces. They were part of a tightly connected system based on the concept of Ma'at, balance, harmony, order. When Ma'at was upheld, the Nile flowed, crops grew, and society thrived. When it was broken, through chaos, violence, or neglect, destruction followed. That's why pharaohs weren't just kings. They were responsible for keeping Ma'at alive, with the help of the gods. Creation in Egypt wasn't a one-time event. It was something that had to be maintained. Through rituals, through offerings, and through proper conduct. Life was a cycle. The gods had built the system. Humans, and pharaohs especially, had to keep it running. And behind it all, still watching from that first mound of earth, was Atum, the god who created everything from nothing. In northern India, over 3,000 years ago, long before the rise of Hinduism as we know it today, ancient priests known as Ishis composed hymns in an old language called Vedic Sanskrit. These hymns, eventually compiled into the Rig Veda, contain some of the earliest religious and cosmic ideas in South Asian history. The Vedic texts don't tell a single clear creation myth. Instead, they offer a collection of possibilities, poetic, complex, and sometimes contradictory. But one of the most important concepts appears in a hymn called the Purusha Sukta. It describes a primordial being named Purusha, a cosmic giant who existed before anything else. He had 1,000 heads, 1,000 eyes, 1,000 feet. He stretched beyond the earth, beyond the skies, beyond imagination. The gods decided to sacrifice him. In that act of sacrifice, a central theme in Vedic thought, the universe was born. From Purusha's mouth came the Brahmins, the priestly class. From his arms came the Kshatriyas, the warriors. From his thighs, the Vaishyas, the merchants. And from his feet, the Shudras, the servants. Even the moon, the sun, and the wind were formed from parts of his body. The message here is powerful. Society and the cosmos are made from the same source. Everyone and everything has its place, not by accident, but by design. But there's more to Vedic mythology than Purusha. Another central figure is Indra, the storm god. He's not a peaceful creator, he's a warrior. In one famous myth, Indra faces a dragon named Vitra, who hoards the waters of the world. The land is dry, the rivers are blocked, and nothing can grow. Indra, armed with a thunderbolt forged by the god Tva, strikes Vitra down. The waters are released, and life returns. It's not just a battle. It's an explanation for why the monsoon arrives each year. Why rain matters. Why storms are both feared and celebrated. Indra, however, isn't a perfect hero. He's impulsive, boastful, sometimes reckless. In later myths, he even loses his position as king of the gods. But in the Vedic world, that wasn't unusual. The gods weren't flawless beings. They reflected human nature, just amplified. Then there's Varua, another early Vedic god. He's more mysterious, a deity of cosmic order, of law, of the night sky. He's less physical than Indra, but far more powerful in another way. Varua knows everything. He sees every lie, hears every broken promise. To the Vedic people, he was the eye of morality, the reminder that truth mattered, even before temples and statues. Creation in the Vedic world wasn't always meant to be understood. One of the most famous hymns, the Nasadiya Sukta, openly questions how the universe began. It ends with a line that says, essentially, maybe the gods don't know. Maybe no one knows. Maybe not even the one who created it. It's a surprising idea, especially in such an old tradition. But it tells us something unique. The early Vedic thinkers didn't just tell stories. They questioned them. They were already aware that the origins of life and the universe were full of mystery. So what do we take away from these Vedic myths? We see a world built from sacrifice, a universe that begins in death, not birth. Gods who are not perfect rulers, but powerful agents in a constantly shifting order. And humans, forever connected to the divine through both body and thought, trying to make sense of a system that is vast, sacred, and sometimes unknowable. Chinese mythology goes back thousands of years. Before Confucianism, before Buddhism arrived, before the emperors ruled under heaven, early Chinese communities passed down their own creation story, one centered on a single giant and the silence before everything. In the very beginning, there was nothing. No light, no form, just a cosmic egg. This egg wasn't small. It held everything. Time, space, matter, opposites balance. It floated in the void, silent and motionless for eons. Then, one day, it cracked open. Inside the egg was a being named Pangu. He had been sleeping, growing, waiting, and when he woke, he saw the chaos around him. Light and darkness all tangled together. So, with a great swing of his axe, he split the world in two. The lighter parts rose and became the sky. The heavier parts sank and became the earth. But the sky and the earth kept trying to collapse back together. So Pangu held them apart, using his hands to push the sky upward and his feet to press the earth down. Every day, for 18,000 years, he grew taller. As he grew, The distance between the sky and earth increased 1 foot higher each day. Eventually, the world became stable. The sky stopped falling. The earth stopped rising. Pangu had completed his work. Then he died, but his death wasn't an ending. It was transformation. According to the myth, Pangu's breath became the wind and clouds. His voice became thunder. His eyes became the sun and moon. His body became the mountains. His blood became rivers. His muscles the fertile land. His bones turned into rocks and minerals. Even his sweat became rain. In some versions, the fleas on his body became humans, small, insignificant, but alive. This kind of transformation-based creation is deeply rooted in Chinese thinking. It's not about domination or divine hierarchy. It's about balance and about how life flows from the body of something greater. Later traditions would add more figures. One of the most important was Nuwa, a goddess who shaped humans from yellow clay. Some say she molded each person by hand. Others say she created only the nobles that way and used ropes to splash mud for the rest, explaining the origin of social classes. Nuwa wasn't just a creator, she was a healer. In one famous myth, the pillars of heaven collapsed and tore a hole in the sky. Fires and floods spread across the land. To save the world, Nuwa melted down 5 colored stones to patch the sky. She used the legs of a giant turtle to support the heavens again. The message in these stories is different from what we've seen in Mesopotamia or Egypt. Here, creation isn't about commands or war. It's not even about divine will. It's about effort, endurance, sacrifice. A universe that comes into being through pain and persistence, not planning. There's also a deep focus on opposites. Light and dark, high and low, yin and yang. The Chinese worldview doesn't frame these as enemies, but as necessary halves of the same whole. Pangu didn't destroy chaos. He separated it into harmony. And after he died, his body didn't vanish. It became everything. So while his name isn't as globally famous as Zeus or Ra, Pangu stands as one of the most powerful creators in mythology. Not because he ruled the world, but because he became it. In the highlands of Central America, long before the arrival of Europeans, civilizations like the Maya, the Aztecs, and the earlier Olmecs told stories about how the world began and how many times it had already ended. For them, creation wasn't a single event. It was a cycle. A world would be made, destroyed, then made again. Each version of reality was called a sun, and we're said to be living under the 5th. But let's start with the earliest known version of the story, from the Popol Vuh, the sacred book of the Maya. It tells us that the gods tried several times to create humans and failed. First, they made people from mud. These figures collapsed. They couldn't hold their shape, couldn't stand, couldn't speak. The gods destroyed them. Then, they tried again, this time with wood. These wooden humans could walk and talk, but they had no souls, no memory. They didn't honor the gods. So the gods sent disasters, jaguars, fire, and floods. The wooden people were wiped out. Finally, the gods used maize, corn, the most sacred plant in Mesoamerica. This time, the creation worked. The maize people were strong, intelligent, and grateful. They built cities. They prayed. They remembered. These are the ancestors of modern humanity, according to Maya tradition. What's striking is that humans weren't perfect from the start. They were built through trial and error. And it wasn't just the gods creating humans. Sometimes the gods themselves had to be recreated. Among the Aztecs, this idea becomes even more dramatic. They believed that before our current world, there had been 4 previous suns. In each version, the gods had created life, but something always went wrong. One sun ended in wind, another in jaguars, another in fire, and one in a catastrophic flood. Each time, humanity was wiped out, and the gods had to start over. To bring the 5th and final sun, the one we live under now, the gods gathered in Teotihuacan, the great city of the gods. But none of them wanted to sacrifice themselves to create the new sun. It was too dangerous, too painful. In the end, One of the lesser gods, Nanahuatzin, poor and covered in sores, stepped into the fire. He burned, he rose into the sky, and he became the new sun. But even after that sacrifice, the sun wouldn't move. It just hung in the sky. So the other gods had to offer their blood. Only then did the sun begin to travel across the sky. That's why, in Aztec society, blood was seen as fuel, not just for life, but for the entire universe. Without it, the sun would stop moving. The world would end again. One of the most important gods in these stories is Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. He's a god of wind, learning, and civilization. But he's also a creator. In one version of the myth, Quetzalcoatl travels to the underworld to recover the bones of the dead. These bones are old, from previous worlds, previous humans. He brings them back, grinds them into powder, mixes them with his own blood, and shapes new people. That's how the fifth humanity was born, from the remains of the past and the sacrifice of the gods. This worldview is very different from what we've seen in Egypt or Sumer. The gods here are constantly rebuilding, constantly sacrificing. They aren't distant rulers. They're active, vulnerable, and bound by the same cosmic rules as everything else. Creation is never permanent. It has to be renewed, paid for, maintained through ritual and effort. And at the center of it all is corn. Not fire, not air, not light, maize. Because in Mesoamerican mythology, humans aren't just made of food. They are food for the gods, for the sun, for the cycle of life itself. We've explored some of the oldest creation stories ever recorded, from the floodplains of Sumer, to the temples of Egypt, to the forests of India, the mountains of China, and the jungles of Mesoamerica. Each story is different, but they all try to answer the same questions. Where do we come from? Why are we here? And what does it mean to be human? In Sumer, humans were made to work for the gods, created from clay and divine blood. In Egypt, creation came from isolation, balance, and the daily struggle to preserve order. In India, the world was born from sacrifice, a body turned into a system, a storm god breaking open the sky. In China, the world emerged from a giant's effort, a being who became the earth itself. And in Mesoamerica, the universe was rebuilt again and again, each time paid for with blood, maize, and fire. These are not just myths. They're reflections of how people saw the world long before science, before religion as we know it, before written laws or philosophy. They remind us that creation, in its earliest form, was never clean or easy. It was hard, messy, sometimes tragic, and always connected to the forces of nature, to sacrifice, and to the fragile balance between life and death. We often imagine that ancient people believed in perfect gods, but when you go back far enough, you realize the first gods weren't perfect. They were powerful, yes, but they were also flawed, confused, and sometimes afraid. In a way, they were a lot like us.